Okay, we are live. Yeah.
All right, I would like to call this meeting to order. Ally, would you please take attendance?
Yes, Brian Campbell,
Here.
Mike Wild,
I'm here.
Jenny Sullivan,
She's here. I can see her.
I'm here, Ally.
okay. Michael Grasso,
Present.
Nick Caimano,
Here.
and I see, who's that Mike trying to get on? Is that Mike Biddle?
Mike Wild.
Oh, that's
Wild.
okay. And Dave O'Brien.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum. We have 6 members.
First order of business is approval of minutes from the October 18th, 2021 IDA board meeting.
Move it.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Wild. Do I have a second? Do I have a second?
I'll
I got
second
it
it.
right here.
Mike Grasso, second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carried. Next order of business is accounts payable. You have a list in front of you. Do you have any questions on the payables for the month? Okay, then I'll need a motion to accept the payables.
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Caimano. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Grasso, could I have a roll call vote on that, please?
Yes, Brian Campbell,
Yes.
Mike Wild,
Yes.
Jenny Sullivan,
Yes.
Mike Grasso,
Yes.
Nick Caimano,
Yes.
Dave O'Brien.
Yes. Carried. Next item of business is executive director report.
Good afternoon, everyone. Last month has seen a flurry of activity. Just some highlights. I've met with 3 potential projects, a couple in Warren, one in Washington. 2 of them potentially on a large scale. Continuing to support the chairman with the Canal Side Energy project. Last week I attended a 2-day conference that Habitat for Humanity was hosting in regards to the local housing issues that are faced in the area. Been setting up and meeting along with the chairman with a few public relations companies to discuss broadening the IDA footprint in the area and ways to go about doing that. Reached back out to Densei from the Southern Adirondack Realtors Association about having the IDA give a presentation at their monthly member meeting. And actually today we received another inquiry about a company who's interested in possibly buying a plot at the airport industrial park. Happy to answer any questions moving forward. Thank you very much.
Any questions for Mike? Just as a note, at 5:15, we are meeting with another company at the Hawaii facility to look at the site. So hopefully the lights are on. You also had in your book, in your possession, the financial reports for the year to date up till the end of October. One note on our balance sheet. We do have $180,000 due from our USDA grant. So that is receivable, and hopefully we receive that by the end of the year. So that would increase our assets to almost $2 million. So if we have any other more closing come in during the month, we should have a fairly good year. And looking forward to better year next year. So any questions on the financial reports? Having heard no comments, move on to the next thing. Delineation update. So we're still waiting for the meets and bounds from Matt Steves, and once that's done, we can finalize and get the deed restrictions on the properties down there. I looked for an update today. I did not get an update, so I don't have any further information on it yet. I will inform people when I do it. TDI update, we just received last week or the week before, comments from TDI's attorneys on the pilot paperwork and the host benefit package agreement. Our attorney, Joe Scott and Kara, are reviewing those and should come back to us with information on those. What they think is good, what they think is bad, what they think is a no-no. And hopefully we will then be able to move forward towards closing. Our objective is to close by end of the year, so our attorneys can get reimbursed for their time for the past year. Any questions on TDI? UHCR retirement. On our last meeting, there was 2 questions that were asked. One, I'll find the sheet I got the answer on. The first question was, there's an annual deficiency. Can we prepay that annual deficiency? The answer is yes. It can be paid in a lump sum, and excuse me, subsequently we can, it will reduce the interest on that. Second was estimated annual employer contribution. Was the estimated employer contribution for a full year or a prorated year for the person who's been with the agency will be 7 months at a time. At the end of the year, it was calculated on a full year. It will be prorated when we have to report to the retirement system on what that annual salary will be. And the next year will be there. I will say that a couple other things I've looked at, and I want to make sure people understand before we potentially move forward with this, is that once in the system, you can't get out of the system. So if the idea gets into the system, retirement system, we can never get out. I'm not saying that's a big deal. I just want to make sure people are aware of that. I will say that we budgeted for employer contribution next year for $18,000 in the budget as we get to the budget. Because it's variable based on what the comptroller in the governor's office decide they want the return on investment to be. We have seen here investments as high as 22%. In Washington County, right now it's lower. I think it's 14 and 15%, but generally when interest rates are lower, they're getting a lower return. So you may see an escalation in that. I can't guarantee it one way or another. So I want you to understand that that's not the amount going forward. That's estimated amount going forward until it's adjusted based on actuals. Any questions? Okay. What's the board's pleasure on this? Any of the board members want to make a motion to join the retirement system or not? Motion
Do
by
we need
Mr. Wild. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Jenny. Any further discussion, questions?
So going forward, Dave,
Mhm.
if we don't have employees, you still have to pay into the retirement system because of the expected payout once they retire.
If you don't have employees,
I'm just
the calculation is made based on the salaries. And that's actual salaries during the year. So for example, for this year, it's $20,000. I'm just making a number. The calculation is on the $20,000. If you have 0, then 14% of zero is zero. So it's all based on employee calculation, not based on employee salaries, not based on the agency.
So when you say we never get out, there's really no financial consequence of that. We no longer have employees. It's
That's
not to
correct.
say that that's what we're going to do. But I'm just thinking about what the long-term financial consequences.
The site,
And based on my opinion, there aren't any because we're afraid to join them. Probably.
correct. There have been times in the past where the agency subcontracted out all the administrative work. So in that case, it would have been zero. Any other questions or comments? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Brian Campbell,
Yes.
Mike Wild,
Yes,
Jenny Sullivan,
yes,
Mike Grasso,
yes,
Nick Caimano,
Yes.
Dave O'Brien.
All three. Yes. Okay, Canal Side Energy Park, as I said, we've had some activity down there, quite a bit of activity. I do need to have an executive session to discuss proposed negotiations with the company, so I will defer that comment until later. You did have with you, you did have sent with you, email to you in the packet with bylaw changes. Basically to reflect making chairman chair in terms of title. The other thing was to add the executive director and to differentiate the responsibilities of each position as the administrator and what the executive director responsibilities are. The information I put in the bylaws is exactly what was put in the resolution to approve hiring and adding an executive director. So I would appreciate you take a look at it. Next step will be to bring it up next meeting. We need 10 days notice. So when we get 10 days notice, then we will bring it up the next meeting. So Ally, at least 10 days before the next meeting, we have to send the bylaws out and make sure people understand we're going to vote on them.
Okay.
But after people have reviewed them, has anyone had any comments on it or contributions?
Nope.
Okay. Next step is renewable energy resolution. Kara sent that out. I don't know if you've seen it. I've read it. It's fairly innocuous. It just says we're going to abide by the state's new regulations in terms of encouraging IDAs to support renewable energy programs. We can either, whatever the board's comfortable with, if you have a chance to review it, that's fine. If not, we can defer it to next month. Or we could have either Kara or Ally read that resolution. Whoever can read today.
I don't have a copy of it.
I'll keep your emails straight. So I type in Kara for search, I got 4,385 emails.
The resolution reads in support of renewable energy projects. Whereas renewable energy projects are expanding across the state of New York and effective April 19th, 2021, section 852 of the general municipal law was amended to include language indicating that it is a policy of the state to promote the development of renewable energy projects to support the state's renewable energy goals as may be established or amended from time to time. And whereas the agency has determined that it's in the best interest of the residents of Warren and Washington counties to support such renewable energy projects. Therefore, be it resolved that the agency hereby affirms its support of renewable energy projects to support the state's renewable energy goals as may be established or amended from time to time in accordance with section 852 of the general municipal law.
So that's the entire resolution.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
I'll tell you what I don't like about it, Mr. Chairman. It says now therefore be it resolved that the agency hereby affirms its support of renewable energy, et cetera, to support the state's renewable energy goals as may be established or amended from time to time in accordance with section 852 of the general municipal law. Somehow I hate to give that kind of power into the state for anything.
Well, I don't disagree with you. That's the exact language from section 852 that the state included in that language. So, you know, if you want to amend it to say current renewable energy programs that the state has already initiated, that would be within your purview, but it's that's the language from the statute itself.
Well, of course. Why wouldn't they do that? And why would we want it? I know Christmas is coming, but I'm not going to give anything to the state without knowing what's happening.
I mean, it is in the law, so there's no requirement that you adopt a resolution of this nature, but you know, it is in the law, so it's there anyway. It's applicable to all IDAs.
Well, that's my comment.
Now, does this count for homeowners putting solar panels on their roofs? Do we want to put some kind of limit to what we're trying to accomplish here?
That's a good question, but I think that as an IDA, we wouldn't be working with anyone who's putting solar on their house for individual use, and I don't know, I'll ask Kara what she thinks.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that you would undertake that you would accept an application of that type. I don't know that it would be in a resident. I mean, I assume it would be up to the homeowner if they thought it was in their best interest to apply. But I don't, you know, that wouldn't really necessarily be a project that would fall under the IDA's.
The language is pretty vague. It's like all renewable energy.
Yeah, right.
So what this section did when they amended it is just to add another vague section to the rest of the list of items in that statute.
So instead of supporting, could the IDA would consider supporting or something to that effect? Make it clear that not-
Upon review, we'll consider it. We'll consider it upon review each time. Mike, or Chairman,
Yes,
Brian's looking to wave at you there.
Brian, I can't see you.
He
What's
can't
up,
see you.
Brian?
Hey,
So, yeah, here was my thoughts on this. I trying to understand what Kara said originally, that it's in the law, almost like we didn't have to adopt the resolution, and I may have that wrong. The second part of that was, I would really like to hear from Mr. Bruno, Mr. Leggett, and Mr. Biddle on what their thoughts were, because I'm a little with Nick that, boy, giving something that powerful to the state isn't my early Christmas present either. There's not really enough of us here to have the quality dialogue that we should have on something that could have a lot of overreaching capacity. I guess that's where I'm at with this, but I'd like to hear from Kara. The way she stated that, it sounded like we didn't even have to pass a resolution. It was just in the law, but I might have got that wrong.
Yeah, that's accurate. It is in the law. There's no request from the state or any agency asking this to be adopted. this was discussed at the last meeting, I think.
Yes.
The chairman brought up the amendment to the law. And I think, I mean, I'll let you speak to the purpose, but it was just to indicate that we acknowledge the amendment to the law and we would be supportive of these types of projects going forward.
So is that advantageous to us in future goals? Is that the point?
Yes. I think the spark plug was, we had a potential project that was going to come in, they're going to build on landfills. And we thought that was an interesting concept because most of the communities were against having solar on agricultural land. So I think they were looking at this, and some of the comments were is that the community itself, through the planning boards, are the ones that control whether or not they can build there. And secondly, is that in a lot of cases, as Laura can attest to, NYSERDA is going to override most and dictate where you can put them and where you can't put them. And there will be legal battles, but I think that was important. And the state is also dictating what the assessment of solar is going to be. And I think it's on the 20 meg and above. 20 meg and above, so the smaller projects wouldn't apply. So if everyone's more comfortable, we can defer this to the next meeting and hope more people show up and look at the language. How's that?
Yes, that sounds good. And also have some out language at the end of number 1, so that we're not stuck with everything that comes down, no matter what happens. Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it again, Chairman.
All right, Ally.
Nick, are you saying you don't want Christmas every month of the year for New York State?
Well, it depends on if we get a new governor. You know, we get a governor every month, so we might as well wait and see what happens.
I will say it doesn't matter what we do, they're going to tell us what to do anyways.
I think we should have O'Brien as governor next month.
Thanks. Just what I need.
Flavor of the month. There we go.
I wonder if the state would pay me a salary for that. Ally,
Well, the question is, what sex will you have to be next time?
all right. Let's get to the number training, please.
Yes,
Before we get too much out there.
in your meeting packets, I did include where all the members are at with their training. If it's highlighted, you do have expired training certificates. So if you could get that to me as soon as possible, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. And we have a guest here, subject I communicated with, but I have asked Laura to put a presentation on what exactly the Reconnect program is and what her thoughts are. So Laura, without further ado.
So as no doubt all of you are aware, both Warren and Washington counties have pretty significant broadband problems, limitations, lack thereof, all of the above. Warren and Washington have also contracted with a consultant called BCC Technologies to help specifically identify where those pockets of unserved areas are. Washington County, we're expecting our report by Friday or Monday. So with that, both counties will have sufficient information to start pursuing funding to get these unserved areas done. There is an opportunity through USDA called Reconnect. It is actually a pretty complicated grant. What it allows for is for a municipal or a subsidiary municipality or a nonprofit to be an applicant. Providers cannot be applicants. It will award up to $25 million per application with a 25% match. So multiple counties can only apply through another agency. So Warren could apply separately, Washington could apply separately, but they would be competing applications. If they apply under one umbrella, then it would be a single application. What happens with this is in the application, you divide the unserved areas into what are called PFSAs, provider service areas, and essentially they can look like blocks on that. Here's a neighborhood, here's an area. They are pretty much tied back to the census block problem, which is a limiting factor that we have had all along in terms of what the FCC thinks is served by census block versus what we know to be reality. And those ECC reports will help to prove that we in fact don't have what the FCC thinks we have. So this application is a little bit different because it dictates unserved as residents, businesses, whatever, who do not have access to speeds of 100 by 20. So most previous state-funded applications and other federal applications have used minimum thresholds of 25 by 3. So what this does is, because it is tied back to census blocks, which is why we have had so much trouble getting coverage before, by opening those thresholds up to a minimum of 100 by 20, it's going to make a whole lot more eligible areas than most of the other funding opportunities have in the past. So the data is really critical because, as I said, if we were to sort of paint a bunch of blobs on the map and say these areas are what we're applying for, if there is a challenge to any one of those areas, the entire application is thrown out. You're not given a chance to come back and say, this is why I think this area is uncertain. So I think the data is very critical, and again, historically, federal agencies have accepted ECC data as accurate over and above FCC data. So as I said, it's a pretty complicated grant. The municipality, or in this case, if the IDA were the applicant, would have to actually own the infrastructure. So the grant is actually a capital grant. It is to fund the deployment of infrastructure, not to operate a network. So when I said the IDA would potentially be the applicant, the IDA would be the applicant in partnership with Warren and Washington County and particular service providers. Now, my intention, once we have this ECC report, I want to issue an RFP across all of Washington County, having identified those areas that don't have service, ask for providers to bid on, probably chunk the county up into several different geographies, ask providers to bid on those territories, and then the cost of that bid is what will be used to justify the cost on the application. And presumably Warren County could do the same thing. So once we've identified those areas, IDA and partner, which is the counties and the providers, then designs a network, and the network has to be capable of delivering speeds at 100 by 100. So that is the threshold federally that I think we're moving to, but it's a huge jump because a couple of years ago, those thresholds of 25 by 3 were considered, the best standards that they had out there. So because of the match, so again, you can apply for up to 25 million with a 25% match. So the counties could then potentially contribute all or part of that match. The other thing that could potentially be done is the providers could also, as part of their bid, offer up some portion of the match. Or the other thing that makes this grant complicated is that there is quite a bit of administrative handling once the grant is awarded. You have 5 years to do the build out. It requires quarterly reporting, some of which is fairly technical. So that is a significant administrative burden. So I see a couple of ways to solve that. You could actually construct a revenue sharing agreement with the providers, in which, again, you're not leasing out the network to the providers because you're partners. The grant doesn't allow you to go lease out to any other agency. You become a partner as part of the design of the whole program. But a revenue sharing operation could potentially mean that some sort of payment could be made back to the IDA to then help fund or offset the burden of those administrative costs, which could then either be handled in-house or potentially work with like Georgia Regional Planning Board or some other entity to help with that. So the other thing that to be aware of is along with the application, audited financial statements have to be submitted. I'm unclear, I mean, we're still going through this, because it's fairly complicated. In one place it says 1 year, and in one place it says 4 years, so I'm not sure which it is. So overall, there are a lot of steps that have to happen before I think, you know, we would want a definite commitment to apply or not apply. But the reason that I'm here today is to basically say if we can all construct an agreement that is acceptable to the IDA. And the way that I would do that is I'm going to ask the county to hire ECC Technologies to both develop the RFP that's going to go out and develop the grant application. They have successfully done that. They got 30 million for Gates County and I think 25 million or so for Madison. So they would be an appropriate entity to help construct any kind of agreement between all of the partners, which obviously the IDA would not go forward with any kind of an application until you were, the agreements are all acceptable to you. But the first step is the IDA willing to continue to participate in these discussions? Because the next step will be to ask the two respective counties if they do want to participate and supply some or all of the match. And then the third step is actually going to be how cost effective can this be once you get prices from putting out some sort of an RFP. What is it actually going to cost to do this? And is that 25 million going to cover everything for both counties, some portion, and however that's going to work? The timing on this is that the application is due February 22nd. So again, my intention is to get that RFP out there as soon as possible. Because the first thing that we have to have is what is this really going to cost? And therefore, what is that match amount going to be? And where does that match come from? But if the IDA isn't interested in participating, then what would end up happening is again, the two counties could pursue an application separately. But I, to be honest, don't see that happening because I don't see either county as being particularly interested in ownership of those assets. The reason, to my understanding, again, I want to be clear on this, is the funding is to fund capitalization of deploying the network and equipment. You have 5 years to do it, and you have a lot of quarterly reporting during those 5 years. If at any time USDA believes that the network is not being built out and it's a dead in the water project, then effectively the IDA is on the hook to turn back over those assets. I'm not sure what recapture of funding would be involved. But again, a lot of that can be handled in terms of any agreement that's structured with the other partners. Because I obviously wouldn't want IDA to be out on the ring for everything. It would be handled in whatever the agreement would be like. Any questions on that?
I'm sure there are lots of questions, but
Your mic is off, Sharon.
what you might.
I really, at this point, don't really know. I think we would want to review the materials that you have from USDA regarding the program to determine what our ongoing responsibilities will be, to see if it fits within the parameters of general municipal law, and if we can, enter into this agreement. That's what I was wondering if I now that I understand a little bit more, it's more of a national program. So I was just wondering if in New York, if any other IDAs have done such, have been the applicant in this case.
Again, so the Reconnect program is in New York has not been the recipient of very many awards up until the past couple of years, because most of this USDA money was going to the Midwest, but it broadband becomes more and more important. We're starting to see some of it. So I don't know the answer. I can find out. I do know in talking with consultants that they believe that the IDA would potentially be an ideal.
Okay.
That's
I mean,
their opinion.
I mean, I would want to review the materials that are available to us. If they're online, I can, look them up or whatnot, or if you have them, you can send them to me. And then, review that and then review our municipal law to make sure that this would be something that would fit in your authorities.
Yeah, I would say we would.
Okay.
So could, now we have Kara's statement, it's possible, maybe, we
Yeah.
should review that. What are the board's feelings about investing some time in looking at this? Broadband is a continuation, it's a business issue in different areas of both counties. What are the board's feelings?
Dave, I would be very interested to understand whether or not we could sell this asset once it's built out.
You cannot.
You cannot.
No, you can't
So
sell it,
then
you can't.
The owner is responsible to maintain this asset. And with the increase in severe storms, we need a good handle on what that maintenance, annual maintenance might be. And that would have to be built into some type of lease agreement we have with the providers. So it's, to me, it has a lot of, say potholes, right? We should get caught up in if we're not careful. And I do know that Warren County participated with the Regional Planning Board on another federal grant for broadband expansion. I'm not sure if Washington County was part of that also. Okay, so this is just kind of hedging our bet if we could maybe get some more.
No, the NTIA application was a group of 6 counties applying for some addresses within their county. So it by no means covers all of what Warren and Washington or all of the other counties. The other difference is that application, unlike this one, didn't require municipal ownership of the assets. The providers had that. So essentially what would happen, we should know in that NTIA grant within the next few days, hopefully, we would take those addresses out of the USDA grant, which essentially means that's less money that we would have to find to remainder who are in school. So then they would be complementary, they wouldn't be. Although if NTIA isn't awarded, then what you would do is you would ask for those geographies for request of an NTIA, and you would put them in the USDA.
I'm not sure how the Warren County Board would feel about contributing to something like this. But I know that there's ARPA funding. And this is something that is part of what I believe ARPA funding will allow.
Right.
At least in terms of supporting the build out of broadband. I'm just not sure if you can double dip this stuff. I don't know if the ARPA funding can be allowed as a match to any other kind of grants.
The ARPA funding cannot be used as a match for a federal grant, which this is. So for Warren County to provide a match, the funds would have to come from another account, basically.
So Washington County did, well, they took a different approach than Warren County did. We took all the money as lost revenue based on a calculation done by our accountants. So now that that money was taken as lost revenue went back into different funds that the county had. One, which was capital projects. We put money in there. We did dedicate some of that money for broadband with some of these programs in mind. So we had money to invest in broadband out of our ARPA funds indirectly, because lost revenue frees up the frees up some of the strings, I guess you could
Same
say.
creative.
Correct. Correct. We have a statement and a financial package from our accountant, CPAs, and our audit firm that stated it was available, so that's been verified with this, with the state, so we did that, so we did take a different approach.
It's all in the details.
Again, and I'm not asking for an absolute commitment at this point, because we could get halfway there and just decide it's too complicated, and it just isn't the best solution for either or both counties. Nor do I particularly want to go forward spending more time chasing it on behalf of both counties if we don't have a possibility.
So would we want to invest some time in looking at this? What's the board's feeling?
What was the question?
Do we want to invest some time looking in this and figuring out the details to see what exposure we have and what culpability we have and liability we may have?
We ought to know.
This isn't binding to move forward with this, but it is an important asset for both Warren and Washington County.
Just like the water facility and the other lands that we have, it's still an asset.
Still an asset.
So it's all, to me, in my mind, it's all going to be, can we afford the maintenance of that asset? Because that maintenance is going to be much more than the maintenance of some lands that we might have.
That's a very good point, and I think that's exposure we gotta look at down the road. And hopefully properly constructed, the operation of these will be leased out to one of the providers. And I'm not sure what would happen if one of those contracts broke, because we can't, there's no way we could operate that system.
I would imagine that if you develop an engineered service area that included a bunch of equipment in partnership with a provider, the USDA doesn't allow you to sell or lease out the network without their express permission. But I would think if there was like an unforeseen bankruptcy or something like that happened, and I also would suspect that more than one provider would be bidding, so it's not just going to be with one provider. But if something happened to one of them, then you approach USDA and say, hey, this catastrophic event happened. That's it, by leasing to somebody else or whatever the solution might be. That you could approach USDA and ask.
So another question, as part of the study that they're doing on Washington County, if my recollection is correct, Warren County has people that could be served because there's fiber at the road, but they could not afford the connection down their driveway. It could be a really long driveway, or they just didn't have the cash flow to be able to make even a much shorter connection. So I'm not sure how those are counted, whether they're served or not served. But that's going to be important in terms of the consideration of what type of revenue would come about also. And does that allow us to actually run fiber to the house? Or is it just along the roads?
It's fiber to the home. In terms of unserved versus the digital divide, which essentially says, you know, financial inequity that somebody can't afford even though it is available. Out of the 65 million that was included in the Federal Infrastructure Act, 45 million of that is going to go on a formulaic calculation to the state. So the state broadband offices decide how they're going to deploy it. But there's also a specific set aside that will allow low-income individuals access to funding to basically those who can't afford internet will potentially get that. So the Federal Infrastructure Act is obviously very new, and I think you're going to find that by the time they actually create programs, put out funding opportunity notices, program rules, we're probably a year out from seeing that. So again, both Warren and Washington could wait to see, but I'm sort of not one to say if we can fix the problem now in a reasonable way. I prefer to try and address it until it just doesn't make sense to do it. And we also, again, since a lot of that 45 million of that 65 million is going formulaic to the states get to decide how they want to spend that money. We need more of that input there. We do know that Warren and Washington County do not have 99% coverage, which capacity program.
So shall we at least do some more research and go back in our December meeting and see where we
Yeah.
stand? Is that concurrence of the board?
Yes.
Okay, let's proceed down and see what we can find out, more details. Okay. I do need a motion to go into executive session to talk about negotiations with respect to
Purchasers,
purchasers.
we do
Okay.
have to discuss real property transactions.
Laura can stay here because she was involved in most of the conversation. So, anyhow, so I entertain a motion to get into one executive
I'll
session.
make that motion. Dave.
Or
Mike, second by Brian. All in favor?
what's it for?
Negotiations with prospective purchasers. Ally, could you shut us off, please? All in favor?
Aye.